Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. Okay, what's up?
How are you?
Good. Asking Why podcast, episode 9. Glad to have you guys. So tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do. We'll start with you, Uriah, because Mike's really the guest.
I'm Uriah, and I work here with Clint. And a little known fact, I'm actually Clint's instructor in Jiu-Jitsu, his main instructor. And he owes everything to me, all of his skills and everything to me. But I'm on staff here as a licensed pastoral counselor. I've been here since February, and it's going well. Loving it.
Yeah. And what'd you do before?
I was a pastor. I was in full-time ministry. Did that for 20 years. Everything from children's ministry, youth, college, church planting, senior pastor, everything in between.
Yeah. And we're here to talk about jiu-jitsu today. So
yes.
How long have you been training?
Yes, I've been training for 4 years. I started, 4 years ago. I actually started a little bit before that and had an injury and took a week off that turned into 8 years, and then finally got back into it. And that's when I met you, actually, and invited you to come and started teaching you everything. And here we are. And then you invited me to come and work for you. So
you were such a good jiu-jitsu instructor. I figured it.
That's right. So actually, Mike's going to be hiring me to come and work for him, so I'm going to be leaving you. So
okay, that's fine. Yeah. Please get out of here. All right, and you?
My name is Mike Braswell. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu first-degree black belt. I've been training Jiu-Jitsu for 20 years. I've been doing martial arts for 21. And it's basically all I've ever done. Everything from college through any job I've ever had has been centered around martial arts and Jiu-Jitsu since I was 14 years old.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And so what's your place here in Shreveport?
So we own Bossier Jiu-Jitsu. We also have a location in Logansport, Joaquin area. And we also have a brand new location in Marshall, Texas.
Awesome.
And we've been at our current location on Benton Road for 8 years, but we're going to be getting a bigger facility, nicer. I'm even thinking about getting little massage chairs, and I don't know if I'm going to do that or not. It just sounds great. But
Uriah would appreciate that.
Uriah would appreciate that.
And he can give the massage.
I'll invest. Yeah.
And but no, I love what I do. I love my people. Every single one of my students, without sounding weird, like jiu-jitsu, you get so close to every single person that comes in, so you become a family. And
I'm sure, especially as the instructor.
Yeah, so it's like it's not the same thing, but it's like I got a whole bunch of little family members, like a bunch of my kids, for lack of a better analogy. And I just care about every single one of them.
It's awesome, man. So what tell us a little bit about kind of what BJJ is like.
So Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's different than other martial arts in that it's not about speed. Those, obviously in competition things are different, but the general premise of it is to use leverage and strategy and technique for somebody who is not as athletically gifted, for somebody who's not as big and strong and powerful, to be able to use these things at their advantage to give them an opportunity to defend themselves against a larger opponent.
Right.
And basically what you do is you use your bone structure and you use the earth itself to defend yourself. And I say it like this: I have a hard time teaching somebody who's 115 pounds to punch somebody in the face hard enough to knock them out. Not saying it can't happen. I just have a hard time doing it. Mm-hmm. But I can teach you to use your bone structure and to use leverage and to use the ground to your advantage to keep you from getting hurt.
Right. So where did that come from? Like, where did that idea of jiu-jitsu or using your bone structure or leverage?
So the origin story of jiu-jitsu I guess you might say the myth. I don't know if this is exactly what happened.
Sure.
But there's a
At this
gentleman.
point.
At this point, it's been a long time. So there's a gentleman sitting below a tree, and he sees the oak tree strong, right? The oak's very strong, and then he's watching the snow pile up on the oak tree, and it was so strong, but then eventually the limb breaks, right? But he's sitting under a willow tree, and the willow's kind of weak. But as the willow is gets the weight on it from the snow, it falls down, the snow falls off, and the willow goes back to normal. So that's kind of like the idea is traditionally, but obviously it comes from Japan, and Count Como Maeda came over to Brazil. A couple of different, stories as to why he was there, but Carlos and Elio's dad, Gustavo Gracie, was a diplomat, and they met somehow. Some people say it was at a circus. Some people say it was him starting a Japanese colony in Brazil, and Gustavo helped him do that. In exchange, he taught the elements of judo to Carlos. But the long story short of it is Elio's watching his brother do it. One day a student of Carlos's shows up, and Elio teaches it, and the student liked the way Elio taught so much that he wanted him to teach it. But Elio, not being the athlete, the strong person that he was, he had to adapt jiu-jitsu to make it work for him.
Right. So Elio Gracie, he's a smaller guy.
Very small.
Yeah.
Very sickly too, right?
Yeah. But he, you can go back and see he never backed down from a challenge, and he was using the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu for it to work.
Right. Yeah, so one of the things that I love about it is like little guys like Uriah can use it for their advantage.
Right.
And use it well.
Yes.
No,
I'm
but
a blue belt, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So seriously, like the reality is like women can use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, just for those who don't know, both the guys here are blue belts, and they're both very, very good at jiu-jitsu. So while we're picking, they are very good at jiu-jitsu, and I'm glad for them to be a part of our journey.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it. Okay, so how did you get into jiu-jitsu and like why? Tell us that story.
Do you want the whole story?
Yeah, let's do it. This is an hour and 45-minute podcast. We got the whole time.
Man, this is really funny. So, long story short, you remember Y2K?
Oh yeah.
So my parents kind of thought that was going to happen, so they kind of started making preparations for it. And I was homeschooled, so I was basically.
That makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah. Everybody says that, right? They're like, "Oh, you were homeschooled." Oh, okay,
I'm
makes sense.
sorry, homeschoolers.
Yeah, no. And obviously we're not social. Yeah,
Right.
we my dad, we were building all this stuff, and it was intense manual labor, like getting up at 5 a.m, and Dad, hey, get up and go to work. And so a buddy of mine invited me to a Taekwondo class, and I loved it. It was fun, but it also got me to go home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so I can get showered and get ready for class as opposed to going home at 5:30. So I used it as a method of an escape of physical labor. And then when I started jiu-jitsu itself, that was Taekwondo, and I fell in love with it. I loved it. I started when I was 14 years old. The white belt class was like at 4:45, and then the yellow belt class was at 5:30. And so when I got my yellow belt, I would still show up at 4:45 just to get extra reps in.
Can you explain belt structure a little bit? So when you talk about white, like from
for
kids,
Taekwondo,
yeah.
Taekwondo that's a pretty quick rank. That's like 4 to 6 months of training, depending on the type. Like not every martial art does the same. For this particular one, I'd been training about 4 to 6 months to get my yellow belt. Jiu-jitsu for the kids, we use white, gray, yellow, orange, and green, and different sublets of each one. And we have a card system where we make our kids train 125 hours and know X number of techniques before they can advance to the next rank.
Okay. So they bring their card in every session.
They bring their card in every session. And now, just because you do the card doesn't mean you're going to get promoted. You have to do the card. You have to be a good partner, and you have to know the techniques that are on your thing. For the adults, it goes white, blue, purple, brown, and black. Each one takes between 2 to 3 years, just depending on how often you're training, your knowledge level. I'm real big on how good a partner you are and how good an asset you are to the academy, and which I won't hold that against you, Ryan.
Right.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, they're great, and then I usually 2 to 3 years, from white to blue, blue to purple, or purple to brown, and then sometimes 3.5 to 5 years to black, just depending.
Right.
on a lot of different things. Of course, it took me 5 years to get my blue belt. So,
Really?
yeah. I spent 5 years as a white belt. But it was a different time. One of my dear friends who's a great guy is a guy named Danny Dring, Master Danny Dring. He's in Little Rock. He's one of the first American black belts. He's a fantastic instructor. And he was one of the few black belts around. So we were driving to Little Rock, and we were driving to Memphis, and we were driving to Baton Rouge, going to train with him and a guy named Matt Hamilton. And y'all may know Raleigh Delgado. He was in the UFC, and those are great guys. And that was my first official. And actually, the guy I took my first class with was in August of 2000. Took my first jiu-jitsu class in August of 2000 here in Shreveport at a taekwondo camp, and a couple of blue belts came over and taught some jiu-jitsu, and I fell in love with jiu-jitsu right there.
Yeah, so bring us back. So 14, you started taekwondo.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so walk us through that a little bit.
So we moved from North Arkansas down to Monroe. I kept training. The instructor I was with was a guy named John Drew, and I owe him a lot because he believed in cross-training and training jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, and so he would bring people in. And so I started doing seminars and stuff like that in August of 2000, training at taekwondo training camps. They would bring jiu-jitsu guys in, and then I started going and finding jiu-jitsu people to train with. And then a guy named John Blunchy, who's a very good black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's under Cron now.
Right.
He was originally under Pedro Sauer, now he's under Cron. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and me and Uriah were under him for a while.
Yeah,
Under
he's fantastic
Brian
jiu-jitsu
Andrews.
guy. And I met him in...
Shout out to Gator Pit.
Yeah, great. I've trained with Brian for years. He's fantastic. Really technical, a really good guy. And anyway, I started training with John in 2003. And then there was a little period in time at the Taekwondo school that we hosted a guy named Guilherme Maia, who was a black belt under De La Riva. We trained with him for about a year. And then he moved back, and that was some brutal classes. You'd run for an hour, do push-ups. He'd show you one move, and then you train for an hour, and you drill one move for like 30 minutes, and it was, and then I trained with John for a very long time, moved over here. John was under Alan Hopkins, and then I was under Alan Hopkins for a long time, another fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner.
Mm-hmm. We did seminars with Hopkins. Good stuff.
He's a genius. He really is. He's fantastic. And now I'm glad to be under the Pedro Sauer Association, which my entire family tree is under the Pedro Sauer Jiu-Jitsu Association. And he's Master Sauer is he is a great human being. He's a fantastic jiu-jitsu instructor. And it's interesting, like, he's one of those guys, like, when he enters a room, like, people, like, if you ever want to know who Pedro Sauer is, as soon as he walks in the room, you know. He's magnetic. He's awesome. He's a great guy. He's a good person, good heart. And I've gotten to train with so many amazing people. I mean, Hobson Mora, Cron Gracie, a lot of the different Gracies. They're all great.
So speaking of that, for somebody who's listening and they're interested in jiu-jitsu and they don't really understand, Helio came over, kind of keep walking through that story. So we're going to just kind of jump between your story and the origins of jiu-jitsu and kind of.
So Helio has an entire family of children. It's the largest and most famous sports family in the world is the Gracie family. There's a lot of them, right? And so Horian moves over to California, I believe in 88, 89. Master Sauer actually moved to Salt Lake City, I believe in 1990, 1991. So the first UFC takes place. Interesting story about the first UFC. So the first UFC takes place, and the idea is to pit martial art against martial art. See which one's the best.
Right.
And obviously we all know the story. Horace Gracie goes in. Oops, sorry.
Well, we do.
Yeah. So a lot of folks don't know. So basically what happened is they had all these different martial arts. They had boxers, they had kickboxers, they had savate, they had sumo wrestlers.
Sumo, yeah.
They had all these different martial arts come in. They had traditional karate guys. And at the end of the day, a shoot fighter, right? Ken Shamrock, I believe, was a shoot fighter. At the end of the day, jiu-jitsu won. Horace Gracie goes in, and and by the way, I've gotten to meet Horace. He's a great guy.
It's funny because at the time I was taking Taekwondo.
Yeah.
And my dad and my uncle were instructing in Pineville. And I was like, I don't even know at the time, like a green belt or something.
Right.
And I hated Horace Gracie because he was so boring.
Right.
At the time, you want to see people knock each other out and kick each other in the face and, do the Jean-Claude Van Damme, movie type, things.
Right.
Bruce Lee punches 47 people at one time and wins, and so I'm like, this dude's just grabbing
And
people and holding on to them.
Unassuming little guy too.
Yeah, especially compared to Ken Shamrock and these other guys.
Yeah.
And yet he's just trouncing them. And it's so hilarious looking back, and we'll get to that. But
and I also think I want you to hold that thought for later when we come to self-defense.
Yeah.
Because it gives a misdirection as to what self-defense really looks like.
Exactly.
So Hoist goes and wins. So Alan Hopkins is at the first UFC, and if you ever go to the Gracie Museum, his ticket is in the Gracie Museum as one of the tickets for the display. Cool. It's pretty neat. Yeah,
that's awesome.
So anyway, they that kind of put jiu-jitsu on the map, right? But even then, the UFC is not that popular until like 2000, maybe 2002, when people really, they changed the rules and stuff like that.
And people said that Hoist wasn't necessarily the best fighter, but because he was smaller, that he. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the truth is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's so much lore.
Yeah,
there's a lot of lore, so I can't speak to the historicity of that. I know Hoist is really tough.
Oh, for sure.
And Hickson is really tough, and that's our lineage, right? Master Sowers under Hickson, Gracie who's under Ilio. And then if you look up Hickson's fights in Japan and some of the wars he went through and the tournament format that they used to go through, but there were some great warriors that fought over there that weren't quote unquote part of the jiu-jitsu lineage.
Yeah, Choke is such a great documentary.
Oh man.
If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's on YouTube for free. So.
It's probably one of the best, if you don't know anything about how jiu-jitsu and how it relates to Vale Tudo, or what we would call no holds barred. Vale Tudo's, the Brazilian version of no holds barred, right? It's just pretty neat to see the what leads up to a fight and how jiu-jitsu works in a fight.
Another great 80s movie.
Yeah, right. So, what was the other one that had the five guys going against the other five guys? It was a Taekwondo movie, Best of the Best.
Yeah.
That was another one. So then as the late 90s come along, and then you got great martial arts instructors like the Machado brothers. I mean, they're fantastic and they're great people. I know Carlos very well. He's fantastic. There's a Carlos school there's a Carlos Machado school here in Shreveport. They're fantastic, great guys, and we have all these different instructors, and then jiu-jitsu. Probably around 2010 is when it really becomes popular, because I was really training in we would have to go to seminars. There weren't jiu-jitsu schools around.
Yeah, so pause there. So that's what kind of happened in the jiu-jitsu world, and at the same time, you're kind of paralleling.
Yeah. So I came up at a time, I started training jiu-jitsu in 2000, and my first jiu-jitsu class was taught by a blue belt and a guy named John Hubbard, right? Who John Hubbard recently is a good friend of mine. He recently got his black belt, I think a year and a half ago.
Cool.
And so he stopped for a little while and came back. And
congrats, finished. John.
And so anyway, man, it's interesting. We think of jiu-jitsu as so popular now, but man, in 2001, of course, you got to remember, we didn't have iPhones in 2001.
Sure.
Right? Like we think that we take iPhone for granted, but in 2001, man, jiu-jitsu is not as popular as it is now. I mean, there are black belts everywhere now, right? Man, I remember when you saw a purple belt, you were like,
it was a unicorn. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a couple of American black belts, and there was a bunch of guys that you couldn't understand because they all spoke Portuguese.
Right.
Right. And it was,
and that was not long ago.
No, that was 2003. I did a seminar with Andre Pederneiras. Many of you don't know that's the leader of Novignon, who BJ Penn. He's under, and I got to train with him, and he was showing stuff, and to this day, I remembered what he showed, and I'm like, man, it's amazing. It was hard to understand. He didn't speak English. Hobson Mora, who speaks English now, didn't speak English the first time I met him. Still remember a bunch of his stuff, though, and he's like rolling with a cup of water. And by rolling, we mean sparring.
Right. And
he's very smooth, and you don't really feel him until it's too late. He's got me. Great guy. Super nice. And so then MMA starts getting popular. Right, in 2002, 2003, then you start having...
Right, because you have a shift in and not being UFC not being just pitting, different...
So I think that's an interesting thing. So like people say, well, how does jiu-jitsu measure up in MMA now? Well, of course it measures up great because everybody's training it. Just like Muay Thai, kickboxing, wrestling, everybody's kind of training everything now. So you may have people like Damian Maia who are doing both, and he's an experienced grappler, but he's got to strike. He can strike as well a little bit. And so it's no longer martial art versus martial art. Now it's mixed martial arts is a style in and of itself.
Right.
Right. But it does encompass Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so in 2006, interesting, I did a couple of kickboxing fights. I was doing stand-up, and Danny Dream convinced me through some very kind, loving words to do an MMA fight. And so February 18th, I did my first MMA fight under a show. Fought a really tough guy, happened to win. And I was thinking about fighting again in April, but I was so tired when I got done, because you don't know tired until you've experienced combat. Right? Oh man, it was exhausting, and I didn't know what I was doing as far as conditioning. But John Belushi really helped me with that. John Belushi was really good. He worked out with some guys out in Salt Lake, Mark Twite and Johnny Carlquist, who do they call it Jim Jones, and CrossFit was kind of in with those guys too. And so John Belushi taught me a lot about getting ready for fights. And so from then on, I was in shape to fight, and I started my mixed martial art career in 2006, and I retired in 2010. And when a pretty lady asked me, she's like, "Look, I don't like watching you get punched in the face anymore, and I think family's more important than jiu-jitsu." So
Absolutely.
I chose my wife.
And so you've been married how long?
I've been married 9 years, the first of this month.
Right. You got 2 kiddos?
2 beautiful children. Levi, who loves jiu-jitsu, he's eat up with it. He also loves football. And so I'm either grappling him or throwing a football with him every day. And my daughter, Eden, who's very good at jiu-jitsu, but she doesn't like it as much as Levi does. So we have to, but I consider it a part of their education, right?
And how old is she?
She's just turned 6.
Right.
And she is all girl. And Levi just turned 7 back in July, and he is all boy. And it's so I get the best of both worlds. And I praise the Lord for that.
That's awesome, man.
I praise the Lord for that. My daughter, but I consider jiu-jitsu a part of their education. So I make them do it 2 days a week, right? I don't. They can learn a lot on that jiu-jitsu mat.
Good,
Absolutely.
Dad. Good.
So anyway, and then I moved here in 2012, and November 5th, 2012, we started in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Shreveport Bossier, and we had 8 students. And praise the Lord, we've grown, and I've gotten some really close
relationships. I've been following
y'all
since then. I ran into, what's his name, Derek.
Yeah, Derek Carnegie, he's a great guy.
Yeah, ran into him, met him. We got to talking about martial arts and training and stuff, and I've been following you on Facebook.
And he's a fantastic jiu-jitsu practitioner and instructor as well. And ever since then, man, I've gotten relationships. I've gotten friendships. I go to church with some of my people. We talk. I mean, me and you guys, we sit around. We talk about the Bible, and we talk about. We tell jokes. It's hard to explain what it's like to have a group of people that are so close.
I mean, I tell people it does kind of feel like going to church sometimes in a way. I mean, the vibe there is so cool. Everybody is so welcoming and nice. I mean, every week somebody tells us, because we're transplants from another school, our school moved further out, so that's why we switched, and everybody's like, we're so glad that y'all are here, y'all make us better, and so on and so forth. And so it's it kind of feels like going to church, and you're the cult leader.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I would say, we've talked about this a bunch in switching, even from our old gym, like it was the guys, that we stayed for, the community that we stayed for that we miss now. And some of those guys have come over, but some of those guys we still text and talk with and check in with and see how they're doing. Yeah. And I mean, COVID's changed a lot of that for their training. Because
we're literally trusting each other's. I'm trusting you with my life. When I say stop or tap, I know you're going to do that, and it's just there's nothing like that in the world. It's so cool, the bonds that are formed around just rolling and sparring.
Yeah, so let's get into that a little bit. What's the difference between karate, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu? So let's talk about self-defense a little bit. Because, I mean, we took taekwondo before. I remember growing up doing taekwondo. I got my red-black, and then I broke my arm, and I wanted to go back and get my black belt. I'd fought in some tournaments. I won a national championship, and all the time as a high schooler, like, that kind of, oh man, you can fight, you can do these things. Now, I never fought anybody in real life. So like in your head, you're like, oh yeah, I can do a jump spinning crescent like Jean-Claude. I won this championship. But it's like not knowing all along that you're going to get smoked by somebody if you actually have to use it, most likely. And so now training jiu-jitsu, I look back at my like taekwondo and people are like, oh, well, you did taekwondo for 7 years. Doesn't that transition? And I'm like, well, Sort of, but very little. So talk a little bit about.
So I'm a second degree in Taekwondo, and a lot, there, and every martial art's got different things, right? And so I know some Taekwondo guys who are like tough as nails, man.
Right.
And some traditional karate guys. My best friend Steve Miller, my best friend Brandon Curtis are both traditional martial art guys, right? And so Steve got his start in karate, and Brandon got his start in Taekwondo. Brandon's one of my blue belts. Steve's a black belt, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I think what's interesting, and especially like in 1993, you were probably training Taekwondo because there's nothing else around.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So Taekwondo is much older. And so the differences are primarily Taekwondo, and obviously there's 100 different ways.
Yeah, it's so nuanced.
Yeah, I mean, so there's Taekwondo, there's Isshinryu karate, there's Kempo karate. There's all these different versions. There's Kung Fu. Insert whichever one here.
But most people know all that from film.
They do, yeah.
Right.
So like they know Jeet Kune Do because of Bruce Lee.
Right.
Right. They know karate because of the Karate Kid.
Aikido because of Seagal.
Yeah,
right?
Steven Seagal. Right.
Yeah.
And so what I find interesting is whatever art you're doing, right, do it to the full of its potential. Mm-hmm. So the basic difference is, with jiu-jitsu, we do a lot of stand-up techniques. We do a lot, but it's, primarily it's to get them on the ground because that's where I have the most leverage, right? That's where I can have the most contact. Instead of the bottoms of my feet, I can have the most contact on the ground, which means I'm strongest there, and I can use the earth to my advantage.
Mm-hmm. And where the large majority of people end up very quickly.
Yes.
Right?
So, a lot of fights go to the ground, right? You remember watching those old John Wayne movies where the cowboys just kind of roll around on the ground. And so, with that being said, like, I think that the principal difference is, what we're trying to do, right? But blocks and strikes are primarily, and kicks are primarily what you do in Taekwondo, whereas Jiu-Jitsu, it's a lot more control of the body with joint manipulation for, in the end all, I mean, it's very safe, the way we train it, but the end goal is joint destruction or putting a person to sleep through, in a life or death situation, putting a person to sleep through, blood loss to the brain is essentially what it is. Mm-hmm. And, but Taekwondo is the same thing. Like kickboxing, boxing, the idea is to punch the guy and knock him out, right? So, the same thing is true with the striking arts. But I always say this, like, people talk about patterns. I tell you, one thing that helped me in my stand-up with kickboxing was point karate, because it makes you hard to hit. Mm-hmm. And so, and I've gone through it. I think, I have to admit, I think a person grows if they admit the faults of their past. And the faults of my past were, at times, I was my kung fu better than your kung fu type thing. And in reality, it's whatever the art you're doing is, let that be your art, and I'm going to respect it. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to do what I do. Mm-hmm. And so if I see somebody doing a pattern, now I may tell you, look, if self-defense is what you're looking for, I believe in this so much that I'll teach my children and my wife this, mm-hmm. right? I don't teach them that for self-defense, but I'm never gonna say that somebody's wrong for doing a pattern because that's their art. Mm-hmm. That's their art, fantastic. And whatever martial art you're training, do it and do it right mm-hmm. and do it good and put time into it. And you love it.
I think the reason I love it though, and I will, since I'm not the instructor, say, like, I think that like you said in the very beginning, you can't very well teach a 115-pound person to knock somebody out. So the problem is if my wife's at somewhere and somebody grabs her, right. She can know all the karate in the world, but if somebody's got her in a bear hug from behind,
right.
What's the practical reality of using karate or taekwondo?
Right. And I firmly believe that jiu-jitsu can save your life.
Right.
I teach it to my children, and that's essentially, and in many ways, by the way, not just you go get in a fight. I think jiu-jitsu can save your life in a lot of ways, and I've seen it do that.
Well, we're going to talk about that for sure.
Yeah. So that the principal difference is, the idea of the stand-up, kicking, striking, and jiu-jitsu has, we kick, we strike, we do things, but the primarily thing is to use the leverage of our body in accordance with the earth. When you're running, you're trying to push the earth down. It just doesn't work, so you move.
Right.
Right. So jiu-jitsu kind of uses those same principles to connect to people and to use your bone structure and your leverage.
I have a question too. Yeah. So tell us what the word jiu-jitsu means. Like what
Gentle
is it?
art.
It translates to the gentle art. And so, can you talk about the aspect of so in karate, kickboxing, those things, you're trying to smash somebody in the nose or the teeth or whatever, knock them out.
Yeah.
But in jiu-jitsu, you do have options. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, no, that's so. I think, I go to church and there's different people, religiously, and I think this is something interesting for everybody. You need to work out everything you do with your faith, right? And I have talked self-defense with my faith. I've looked at the scriptures and I've said, okay, how does self-defense in line? The cool thing about jiu-jitsu, and there's a lot of arguments that we hear about, people carrying guns for self-defense. But one of the cool things about jiu-jitsu is if you're a total pacifist, you can do jiu-jitsu because you don't have to hurt people. You can control them and you don't have to hurt them.
Right.
Right? And so moms, right, dads, you got kids who go to school and you want to teach your kids self-defense. One of the things I love about jiu-jitsu, and by the way, I kickbox, I still do boxing. I love them. There's some great boxing schools around. They're fantastic. One of the things that is interesting about jiu-jitsu is that if I get in a fight at school, I don't have to punch the kid. I don't have to hurt the kid. I can stop the self-defense, and I'm less likely to have suspensions and school litigations. And
you're
stuff
just
like
controlling the
that.
situation.
Just controlling the situation.
Yeah.
Right, because you said earlier, yes, it's about bone breaking and tapping somebody out and choking them out, but you don't have to.
But you don't have to. You have control over that. So for those people who might have a religious exemption to violence, which I totally respect, by the way, you can do jiu-jitsu and you don't have to hurt anybody.
That's how I roll with Clint. I just hold him down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Control him.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
For sure. I feel like a little baby when I roll with Uriah. I'm just like, oh, please, sir. Do you want my money?
Right. You gave me money last time. Just
That's
so
right. I
you
was like, take it easy on me.
So that's I think is an important thing to realize is jiu-jitsu truly is for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's why people get scared when you talk to them. I mean, I try to talk, I know Uriah does, to our clients about the mental health aspects, and we'll get there. But, it isn't, it's violent, but it's not violent.
Right.
Right. It's I think like Joe Rogan talks about it being like pretend murder, because you get in these situations, but you're actually learning how to have control over the situation, so you don't have to be violent unless you absolutely need to.
Yes.
Right. And so, like you said, if you're a pacifist, or you're like, oh, I don't really like to be rough, or I don't really like violence. Me too. Like as a therapist, like when I first started training, and I mean I've only been training a few years, but the reality is that it took me a while to be able to fully choke someone hard, because I was just like, I don't really want to be mean. Or, if you're going to go for an arm bar, and one of our instructors were talking about this week, like, you better be pushing that face back and grabbing, the arm. I would never do the face push. I would always just try to get the arm bar. But because I wasn't doing the technique, I would never get it. And I had to realize, like, oh, this is the, like Uriah said, we're agreeing to this practice.
Yes.
And so it's not just being mean, it's doing it efficiently so it works. And it took me a while. Yeah. So I think for the average person going, I couldn't do that, you can because of what it is. You can't because of the myth you think that it is, that you're going to get in there and people are going to just hammer you and smash you and punch you and hurt you. And when in reality, like, yeah, it's uncomfortable. It's not, it's not tiddlywinks, but the reality is that it's very controlled. And
I think something very interesting, like if you saw pictures, I've still got to look at the legal thing. If you look at Napoleon Dynamite, Napoleon is me when I was 14 years old. I looked a lot like him, had the big glasses and walked around. And jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general gave me an outlet to become, gave me the outlet. I got a beautiful wife who is a sweet, godly woman. And I hate to say this, but I don't know that I would have been able to talk to her if I was still Napoleon Dynamite. Right? I wouldn't have my two beautiful children if I was still who I was when I was 14 years old. So jiu-jitsu doesn't change who you are. I think only God can do that. That's just my personal opinion. I think only God can really change who you are. But what jiu-jitsu can do is jiu-jitsu can refine you and make you a better version of yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, definitely.
It can refine you and make a better version of yourself. And so, you talk about, like, now you don't mind choking people, right?
Right.
So
especially Uriah.
Especially Uriah.
When he lets me.
So when you're letting him work.
When I'm letting him work. Yeah.
So
shout out to Lane Killebrew as well for letting me work.
with me, I was So I was so insecure, and then I finally had confidence. So then I went like to the other end of the spectrum, where I got a little egotistical, right? And now, praise the Lord, I think I'm coming back. I think I have for a while come back to the, what I hope is a healthy confidence. But I try to be very introspective, and I try to be like, okay, I try not to I listen to a lot of Jocko, so I read his books and things like that, and you can't let your ego get in the way of anything of growth. Ego is a killer of growth. And so I try to have a healthy ego to where I'm comfortable teaching jiu-jitsu and raising my children, making a call and looking around and living with it, but not have the ego to where I don't let other people grow, to where I take myself for what I am, so that if I'm wrong about something, I can grow from being wrong. And so martial arts has also done that to me. So martial arts took me from being very insecure, very, insert whatever word here, Napoleon Dynamite, to being a little bit egotistical and having a chip on my shoulder. And it also brought me back to the middle. You got to confess your sins of your past, right? So brought me back to the middle to where it's more healthy. And I think the longer you do it, the more it'll refine you and things like that.
Yeah, the thing that I love about the jiu-jitsu community is that there is so much humility there. I mean, there's always one or two, egotistical guys at every level and every belt. But for the most part, you talk to people in the community, and they're very quick to tell you how much they don't know and how much further they have to go, and really how bad they stink at jiu-jitsu a lot. And that's what I really love. And I haven't seen that in other sports like basketball and football that I've played, and even other martial arts, where there was a lot of like, our stuff is the best.
Right. And I've tried to, and I've been a part of schools that were like that. Like I've had the privilege of training all over the place. And when I talk about the love of my school, what I really mean is the love of my people. Right? So, man, jiu-jitsu, there's so much jiu-jitsu out there, so many great jiu-jitsu guys. But having a group of people that I love, there's two groups of people that I love, as much as I love them. Outside of my family, obviously, I love my wife and my children. I love my church. I'm close to my people in my church. I talked to one this morning for an hour, just talking about different things from the Bible, and I'm close to my jiu-jitsu people. And so when I say I love my school, and I'm not trying to come at it from an egotistical, our kung fu better, all that. What I'm coming at it is the absolute love for each and every one of my students that I have, and the love for the community that we build together. And so to me, that is, the jiu-jitsu, the martial art part, that's a huge component, and it's what brings people in. But the more important thing about jiu-jitsu is how you can help people, how people can benefit from it, rather than just beat people up, rather than just choke people, how you benefit from it and how other people benefit, and how it can make you competent enough to where you can actually help people.
Absolutely. So Uriah, tell me a little bit about, because the goal of the podcast for people listening is to, and we're going to get to the mental health benefits of it and the benefits, but for people to hear all three of our kind of versions, because everybody winds up doing different things and having different paths. But I feel like jiu-jitsu is such an equalizer. That's what I love about it. It's like you come and you have somebody who's a therapist, you have somebody who's a doctor, you have somebody who's only done jiu-jitsu their whole life. You have, there's all these walks of life, girls, women, all these different things. So tell us a little bit about, how you came to jiu-jitsu. And
so I was down in New Orleans doing seminary. And I was probably supposed to be writing, a really exciting paper, on systematic theology or something like that. And I'm flipping through the channels, and the Ultimate Fighter Season 1 was on. And I just happened to tune in right at the end when Bonner and Griffin were fighting, that classic UFC fight. And I was just hooked at that point. I was like, gosh, this is so exciting. And, Hurricane Katrina comes, we move back here, and I start training, I get hurt. But I was hooked. I even started training MMA and had an exhibition fight, and I was okay. I'm done. That's off the bucket list. But I fell in love with grappling, and I did a Google search one night, how to get better at jiu-jitsu, and everybody was saying, put on the gi, put on the gi, put on the gi. And so I ordered a gi, started doing private lessons with a guy, and then ended up at Gator Pit. Matt Paget was doing some work at the church, and I ran into him in the bathroom at the church, and he's wearing a jiu-jitsu shirt, and we started talking. And I'd been talking to you and his name Danny over at the Machado School, and Brian, and I think it was because I met Matt that I ended up going with Gator Pit, and so that was sort of my foray into it. But looking back, I was always fighting. I was always defending myself, always getting picked on, always having to fight, and didn't know I could fight until I had to, and then I kind of started liking fighting, and then you grow up, have kids, and become a responsible adult. And I was a preacher, so I had to be responsible. But gosh, I kind of missed that, and so I got back into it. And I know we're going to get to the mental health aspect of it, but that's the part that keeps me coming back. And you and I talk about this all the time. I can just be having a week where just the funk is just hanging over me and will not go away. And I can go to the gym for an hour and a half, and literally get smashed, and just be thinking while I'm under somebody like, gosh, I love this so much. And I'll go home, and for days I will feel just great. I mean, there's nothing like it. The community aspect that is there, the fellowship is there. It's a full body workout too, which is great. That's what I love about full body workout, full mental workout. You're always solving puzzles, and there's instant feedback. Like me and you'll roll for 5 minutes. If I can't get something on you, I'll roll with somebody else, and I'm constantly working things out. And so it's just to me, it's the perfect activity. But the mental aspect is probably the thing that keeps me coming back, because that's we joke that is our therapy.
Yeah, for sure.
It is our self-care.
Yeah, so let's talk about it a little bit. Mike, what do you think some of the benefits of doing jiu-jitsu have been for you, but that you see you unlike us get to see all these people who come out, different walks of life every day, every week, who train, you got a class almost every day of the week, I think. Yeah. So we'll talk about kind of spiritual, emotional, and physical aspects. So in whatever way you want to talk about it.
So spiritually, there are people that believe that martial arts has a cult type thing. I don't believe that. I believe anything can become a cult, right? But what I mean is they believe it in of itself is a religion, and I don't believe that. What I do believe is that when you train with people, and you said it earlier, you have to trust one another, right? So we roll and we get to know each other through combat, and we get to trust one another spiritually, because we've all talked about the Bible and we've all been able to discuss things. When you trust somebody not to hurt you physically, you can also trust them not to hurt you spiritually or emotionally. And so what I find is that the people that I'm really close with in jiu-jitsu, I can have in-depth conversations with them about spiritual matters. And I can just ask them questions, and they can ask me questions. And because we're so used to, even if we disagree, we're so used to sparring physically that we can spar spiritually, and we just listen to what each other have to say.
It's the ultimate vulnerability, isn't it?
Yeah, you're vulnerable. You could put me to sleep, and there's nothing I can do about it now, so I'm going to ask you to let me go. Okay, great.
Yeah. Or, I could be training with you, you and I have never rolled, and so I can be training with you and just totally embarrass myself, by not knowing how to do something, or just continuing to do something just stupid to put myself in bad spots, and you submit me over and over again. And I have to deal with that. And so it becomes like this tool for ego transcendence, if you will. Right. And there's a sign on your door that says, "Leave your ego in the parking lot." And I think that because of the vulnerability aspect, that's the piece that's so good spiritually, mentally, physically. It translates at home if you're married. There's times when you just have to just take stuff and be okay with it.
Yeah, we also have this thing, right? The alpha male, right? Yeah. We're not vulnerable because we see Superman as an archetype, right? Where he never gets hurt, never does anything wrong, never makes the bad decision. And and I've talked to people if I'm struggling with something or if I have an issue with something, whether it be spiritually or emotionally, or, I struggle with depression, or I have anxiety for whatever, if they see the person that's supposed to be strong also struggling with the same thing, sometimes it can make them feel better. And so spiritually, being able to ask tough questions and being able to have conversations with people to get to know more about your Lord, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So that's that one. And that and clearing your mind. Because when you're training jiu-jitsu for the 5 to 10 minutes or however long, you're not thinking about anything else. You're just in the moment. It's the only time where, that's what I used to love about MMA, right? You get in that cage, and for the next 15 minutes, that's all you're worried about.
It's the purest form of meditation.
It's the purest form. You can't worry about your bills. You're not worried about, what's going on with your family. You are literally just focused on what's going on in that very second, in that nanosecond of time that we're a part of. We're living in that moment, and it is amazing.
No, that's truth, man. I mean, every time that I go, it's the only thing in my life. If I'm lifting weights, if I go for a run, if I take my kids for a walk, if I do all these things that are great and amazing and I love doing, there's still that little part of my brain that's like, well, you need to be doing something else, or you need to be being productive, or are you spending time with your kids right now effectively? Like, are you giving them enough attention? Are you giving your wife enough attention? Like, there's just all these thoughts that are floating around that Satan's constantly attacking, and you not being good enough, and the anti-gospel of, God's not good, and all these things. Right. And it is like, when I train, I don't think about any. I actually surprise myself, because by the time I get in my truck and I start driving home, and I'm on this high, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just spent 2 hours not thinking about anything else. That was so nice. And
a lot of times you're on the phone with me or Lane talking about your roles and what happened. And,
Yeah, it's like, me and my friends used to go to the movies, and one of my favorite things was when we leave from the movies, we'd just talk about the movie and what was good about it, what was bad about it, and what we took out of it. And of course, being a therapist, like, I'm always doing that with everything. So yeah, that's one of my favorite things about jiu-jitsu is, especially when you start that first year, it's still going on, and I'm still super new and terrible. But the reality is that calling you or calling whoever afterwards and being like, okay, I did this and I did this and I tried this and this happened. And it's never like the thing I love about it, it's never like I smashed this person, or I won, or y'all can touch.
We're
it's
getting
fine.
vulnerable here. We're used to touching.
Talking about feelings, you start
Very
reaching
vulnerable.
out. Don't start rolling right here in the middle of it. We're about to do a wrist lock. But the reality is that, like, it's not about ego. And if you talk to me on the phone about that, I would be the first one to be like, bro, like, you're gonna get smashed next week, like, or if I called you and was like, man, I got so and so and tapped so and so. If it's ever anything like that, it's about how you got better. It's not about beating someone else. And that's what I love learning is, like, that relates to Jesus, that relates to good mental health, that relates to humility, is like, me and you, as we train, are competing against ourselves. And I'm trying to be better than I was last week and the week before. And knowing that, like, Tuesday I did great, felt like I was flowing, I was amazing. I called, I'm like, dude, I've learned everything, I've unlocked jiu-jitsu. And then Thursday I'm like calling you going, I was terrible. Everyone caught me. I was so sluggish. I was
the new guy.
Yeah. The white belt who, doesn't know anything. Like, I was, doing this and did something dumb and he caught me, And it's not, I don't feel like it allows for very much ego in and of itself, spiritually, emotionally, because of course you can, and there are those outlier people, but the reality is if you do it by yourself, if you do jiu-jitsu by yourself, I feel like it's way more risky for that. But if you do jiu-jitsu within community with friends and with people who are on the same path as you, then they don't allow you to be that, because that's not what's best for you.
Well,
it's like discipleship. Honestly, it's a strange, as a Christian, doing jiu-jitsu, it leads to really good conversations, really good discipleship, really good relationships. You say all the time, Mike, like, you can't put your hands on somebody and lie. Like, you cannot tell a lie when you're rolling with them, because they know what you're doing and who you are. And so it makes you be honest. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously, there's so emotionally, we talk about, people don't go to church like they used to, right? And they used to have that community. Slowly but surely over time, so what happens is like, if you ask yourself right now, you're listening to the podcast, who are my friends and why are they my friends, right? So I can tell you the vast majority of my friends have one of two things in common. The vast majority of them. One, we go to church together. and I'm very, very close to the people who go to church with me. Or 2, we do jiu-jitsu together. I am very, very close to the people I do jiu-jitsu with. So we have something in common that we can talk about, right? As opposed to, well, why am I friends with this person? Oh, we both have kids the same age. Our kids go to school together, so we're friends. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. You may have a best friend that's like that, and y'all get along great. But what I'm saying is, you've got a community of people who are, who at least have at least one thing that y'all like together. And whether you disagree on it, y'all, and we mess with each other and we have fun, we have friends. And there are people that come up to me and go, man, I want some community. I want some friends. People who are over the age of 25 and have kids, they don't have as many friends as they used to. Now they have this entire group of people that check on them and that they can joke with and they can have fun with. And it's just an amazing
That's something
thing.
that you're really good at is checking on people too. Unless you're only doing me, I'm assuming you.
Well, you're
check
my
on-
favorite of all of
Okay,
them. I don't ever check on
thought so. I didn't want to bring that up.
No, I try to check on
but
all my people.
you're really good at that. Another thing that it's done for me is that it helps. So you know how we have a tendency to kind of put everybody in their neat little boxes. You know, we have just that's what we do. We compartmentalize, and I get because any given day you could be rolling with a doctor, lawyer, oil field person, stay-at-home mom, African American, Asian. You know, everything, and it enables you to take down those walls or those boxes that you've had those people in, and so then when you're out in the community and you're with different types of people, you don't see them as different. Or as different as you did, and I think that is huge. And I was telling one of my clients this the other day, and I made the comment kind of out loud when I was talking, but I believed it when I said it. It's like it's got to be the closest thing to the kingdom of heaven that we know on earth, because we just love and respect and get each other and appreciate each other so much without judgment or bias.
Your podcast was at episode 4, where you were talking about the racism and what's going on.
I think so.
Episode
Yeah.
4. By the way, you're a fantastic interviewer.
No, thanks.
Your podcast is awesome. One of the things that was interesting is you were having a serious conversation about some serious things, and I've been fortunate. You know, you talk about trust, and we talk about we can talk about spiritual things. I've had those same conversations with several people from minority communities of different, and they have their own thing, and I can sit there and listen to them, and they feel comfortable talking to me about that, right? I have people come up to me. We have, and y'all see it way more than I do being therapists, but we have a community where people can feel comfortable having the conversations, and that's interesting that you say that, because, man, we don't when I tell you everybody's equal on that mat. Everybody's equal on that mat.
I mean, it's really true.
It's really true. Like, everybody's like, oh, there's no, man. You want, if people talk about equality, man, come to a jiu-jitsu mat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see somebody, and if you even remotely think, based on what they look like, that you're going to do something to them, and then they trounce you for 5 minutes, it doesn't matter how tall or short or small or whatever. It's like, and with a gi on, you're not seeing a whole lot of anything anyway. But my favorite thing has been, and I think when I really realized jiu-jitsu is legit and works and is the thing. I mean, I remember, when you've been there a year and a half, and you actually can do something, and then a new person comes in. Because at Gator Pit, I was the newest person for 6 months, I think. It was a pretty long time. And then new people came in, and I was just getting smashed by everybody because everybody was way better than me. And when we say smash, we don't literally, I mean, sometimes we mean literally, but most of the time we just mean them being able to do what they want with us, which is the whole point.
Right.
And I remember somebody coming in, and he was like young airman, 23. He had this tight Under Armour shirt on. I mean, I could see his abs through his Under Armour shirt. I'm like, oh, great. This kid's about to just, give me a time for 5-6 minutes. And it was just I had to work into bad positions for him to be able to do something. And what you don't realize is that moment where you realize it's actually really hard to win if you don't know what you're doing. It's not like the movies. It's not as easy to just get on top of somebody and choke them if they know how to defend a little bit. And that's what I was trying to tell my wife and, our kids. We do stuff at home all the time. And I'm like, if you just know a little bit against somebody who knows nothing, you're going to be way ahead of the game. So, again, that equalizer, when you walk in and you see somebody and you're like, oh, she's a girl, or this is a guy, or he's, overweight, or this is whatever. It's like none of that matters if their technique is on point. And that's such 100%. A cool equalizer, because it makes you go, oh, all the things in life that, and again, it's this parallel to Christ, like all the things in life that we value, what we look like, our prestige, our job, how much money we make, what ethnicity we are, what culture we come from, if we're divorced or not, whatever. It doesn't matter. And so for 5 minutes or an hour, people get to come and train and engage with people, and none of it matters. And if it does matter, you quit. And I really do believe that if you're a person that's what you value, then you don't make it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah,
100% agree with that. That's man, that's awesome.
I was going to talk about, we talked about this earlier, but I think another one of the benefits is the connect for men especially. I mean, I think for women too, but I'll just talk because I'm a man. But in this culture, I think men especially need affection, affirmation, and attention as boys. And because of the trauma history we all have, and because of a lot of the things we've gone through as men, we, like you said, this machismo, this alpha male, this thing we're taught through movies and film and through our own parents, it's killing us. Our suicide rate's insane, our mental health rate, our anxiety or depression. And coming into the gym and getting to touch and laugh and hug and put your arm around somebody, and then physically rolling. I mean, you have to be on top of people, and I remember the first few weeks of being like, this is super uncomfortable.
Remember
to be
the Sunday school room incident?
Yeah, for sure. So, let me tell you this story. So Uriah and I were training at Gator Pit, and he's like, well, come up, I can show you some stuff he was working at the church. He's like, come up, and I got some mats, and we'll throw down some mats. 7
o'clock in the morning.
It's like before work, we'll train, because there wasn't any morning classes, so I wanted to go more, but I could only go like in the afternoon, and I didn't want to leave my kids. And so Uriah's like, well, come in the morning before work and we'll train a little bit and I'll show you some stuff. I'm like, great. So we lay these mats down in this room, the door's shut. And so we're like rolling, and he's on top of me, like doing, whatever he's doing. I think he's got like, his favorite thing was like, wrap his legs in and get on your stomach or get on my in mount and
surfing.
Yeah, do the Superman thing. And at the time I'm like, I have no clue what to do. So you're just on top of me, smushing me. In this,
can't breathe.
Yeah. And so all of a sudden the door opens, and it's this like Hispanic lady janitor.
It's the housekeeper.
Yeah, and she's like, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and we're both look up,
It's not what it looks like.
Yeah.
It's not what it looks like.
It's so funny. But it's like, but that whole, we're so homoerotic, homophobic and all of these things as men sometimes. But what that does is that keeps us from connecting. It keeps us touching and hugging and saying, hey, it kills us. And we're in this very depleted, deprived thing where we don't know how to be affectionate with our wives. We don't know how to be affectionate with our friends and with our brothers in Christ. And jiu-jitsu also opens the door to, like, if you stick with it, touching you're going to be really comfortable with it very quick. And you have to be.
Your sweat's dripping into my eye and my ear.
Yeah.
Right, and people listen right now, and they're like, I don't want that to happen.
Trust me, it's not as bad as it sounds.
No, for sure.
It's not that big a deal.
And it's not that often.
No, and I'm a hugger. Like, I think I hug y'all every time you come in,
Sure.
right? I'm a big hugger. I hug at church. That's the COVID thing's killed me because nobody wants to hug me anymore.
Right.
I'm like Lotso Huggy Bear, man. Give me a Yeah, no, and you're right. And it also, I think, you're talking about like the machismo and what men go through and no touch. We also put this thing on that we're not allowed to fail.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Man, you're going to fail at jiu-jitsu.
Oh, that was the biggest.
99% of the
99
time.
You're going to succeed once, and it's going to be like, wow, that feels weird. I want to go back to failing.
That's probably the best part of doing jiu-jitsu for me is like, it's okay to fail. And you go in expecting it every day. That's
something that I've tried to instill in my children. It's okay to fail. My son threw an interception yesterday. I didn't get to go, but he threw a pick yesterday, and I was saying to myself, hey, I'd rather him throw that ball than sit there and hold it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just throw it, man. Mm-hmm. You'll get better at it. Just throw the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's such a good rule for life because we put these expectations. We've either had them put on us or we put them on ourselves that you can't fail, that you have to perform, you got to make straight A's, you got to go to the best schools, you got to have the best wife, you got to do these things. And I think jiu-jitsu is like the opposite of that. You're going to fail a lot. Almost every time. So what's that say about you? Mm-hmm. What's that say about the people you're interacting with? Can you build up that emotional and physical and spiritual mentality that your worth is not based on being able to submit somebody every time?
Yeah.
That your worth is based on your effort, on your connection with people. And we know this. You have people who show up and just based on gifting and natural ability, some people are going to progress better than others. Some people are going to, like, one of the things I think that has been so good for me is being in the Army. and being in combat and being in these situations that are dangerous, and then coming to jiu-jitsu, I think I didn't have to do that 6 months of like fight or flight training. A lot of people come in and it takes 6 months to even learn anything because you're always in that right brain functioning. You're always just trying to be like, it's spazzy white belt and freak out because you've never been in a situation where you might die.
Right.
You've never been in a situation where your brain thinks you're in danger. And although you're not in danger in jiu-jitsu in our gym, your brain doesn't know that. And so it takes a while. And so it was good for me because I came in already kind of had that worked out of me. So I was able to learn quicker and pick up. And there's just certain people who are going to pick up different. But that's on you, right? You're not measuring that against somebody else and saying, oh, why didn't they get promoted? Or why didn't they get their this and that? It's like, well, if you're thinking that way, like you've already failed jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
Like that's the way you can fail, is if you are measuring yourself against the other people that you're training with.
I learned early on the concept of getting in bad spots and working out of the bad spots. And now when I get in a bad spot, I'm like, I've been here hundreds of times. I'm okay. Like my heart doesn't even beat fast. I mean, I'm just there. And most of the time, the person is going to be so excited about trying to submit you that they're going to move out of your way so that you can escape. And so that's probably been the biggest thing for me in jiu-jitsu, is just allowing myself to get into those bad spots. Now, granted, there's all the people like you can put me in any bad spot that you want, but for the most part, I'm just like, yeah, let's just start. I'll give you my back to start with, and I'll work out of it. And that translates into a great life lesson, is because we're, again, back to the scared of failing, but when I'm in a bad spot in life, I can always draw on something from the match. I was under Steve Hill's knee on belly. If I survive that, I can survive this.
With a mountain on top of you.
Yeah. So
Brian's side control, or Joe, or Eric, or any of the guys
Brian's tricep slicer. If you can survive that, then you can go through life, do anything practically.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree, guys. It's awesome.
So, we talked about a little bit. I wanted to cover this too, like the idea of policing in jiu-jitsu, because on one of our podcasts we talked about like the idea of control, and I think I want to get your thoughts, because I know you shoot and you do a lot of that, and and you see a lot of police officers that come into our gym. We have a ton of guys who are police officers. But just the idea, and Jocko talked about this a lot, just that every cop should be a blue belt. What do you think about that idea?
Oh, I think it's a great thing. It's interesting. My old Taekwondo instructor said this one time. It was like with our military, they'll train and they'll train and they'll train, and it takes forever for them to go to war. Mm-hmm. Right? With the police, sometimes it's the opposite. They go to war, and they train a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So, man, it's a hard job to do, mentally and physically. And I think anything that you can do to give yourself a tool that'll A, keep you safe, and B, potentially keep somebody that's in your, whether you need to arrest them, whether you're there in your care, keep them safe. The more tools you have, the better it is. And I don't think, especially for my people who aren't big and giant and strong, the more training you have in jiu-jitsu and the more comfortable you can get cracking that, controlling that adrenaline dump. So you just said it, your lizard brain kind of takes over, man, when you don't know what's going on, and you start, one of the things, and by the way, for those of you who don't train jiu-jitsu might be interested, it's okay to adapt to become better. Right, that's all weightlifting is, right? Mm-hmm. You put strain on the muscle, you put stress on the muscle, and it adapts and becomes better. So the same thing happens with your entire life with jiu-jitsu. You put stress on yourself and you become better. Yeah. So if you can get into situations where you make yourself uncomfortable and the lizard brain takes over, if you can control that, man, you're way ahead of the game. Yeah. So and so yes, I agree that jiu-jitsu can help police officers control and put themselves in better situations and control the situation even better, and can save their life if heaven forbid it does take a lethal force encounter. They have all the different steps and supposed to maybe and again I never Monday morning quarterback anything that a police officer does. I try to learn from things, but I don't judge them for the decision they make in a split second. But that being said, if you have a lot more options between option A and option Z, if we have B, C, D, E, and F, I think that helps everybody. And the Gracie survival tactics is an amazing thing for police officers. And if you're a police officer out there, go train jiu-jitsu. It not only is it good for your job, but you have a hard job, and so you want to talk about getting 5 minutes where you don't have to think about your job and you can just you can decompress. That's great. But the more jiu-jitsu and the more martial art that the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you listen to this podcast, I mean, think of all the things we talked about that are a benefit.
Right.
That would be specifically beneficial for first responders. Just getting that escape, getting that mental break, getting community that's outside of the police department or the fire department or whatever it is for first responders. Because, again, that community piece is what's going to help us through the crisis and what's going to help us process the pain and get it out and, find other people who are struggling and who get on the equal playing field. And so you don't feel like you're so alone and so isolated. But yeah, the bigger benefit, I think, is just controlling people safely, is just getting in a situation where, because I think in my experience, like already being in public, being in situations where maybe somebody's arguing or there's some situation when I got my kids and something's going on, I mean, I feel a million times more confident, like without even thinking unconsciously, like I'm not, if something happened, like I'm going to be fine unless this person's a purple belt, I mean, unless they're my athletic ability.
Go to T position, inside leg trip, take them down.
And if they are a purple belt during the middle of it, like, hey man, why are we fighting? Let's go get something to eat.
Well, like the statistical likelihood of somebody who trains jiu-jitsu and being in it longer and better, who is trying to fight in Target or getting in a fight in Chili's or whatever it is that's the situation, is going to be so unlikely. Like the people who are out there fighting in public and grabbing people and snatching people up are so they're not training jiu-jitsu every week.
Right. And my mom used to say this about bullies, and I never believed her until I got older, and I realized she was right. They're the bullying. There's something there that person has got trauma too.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. And so when they're like, just walk away, you're the bigger man. No, so Jean-Jacques Machado, who is a hero of mine, he's an amazing martial artist. He told his story he was actually on Joe Rogan's podcast. He told the story about he bumped into a guy at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was going into a drugstore to get something to take, and the guy was drunk, and he was screaming at him, and he didn't beat him up, and he just walked off. This is Jean-Jacques Machado, right? And a few months later, the guy comes in and thanks him for not beating him up. His dad died, and he was drunk, and he wasn't having a good day. And so, it's something that I try to remember is, why is this person having a bad day, or why does this person want to fight? Are they, why is this person drunk? Or do they have an addiction problem? Or did their girlfriend just break up with them? And if I beat this person up and slam this person's face on the ground, that I just make their day all that much worse.
And it tells you something about yourself too. Like, why did I feel the need to do, unless it was a true self-defense situation. If you feel inclined to do that, that means you need to go and do more jiu-jitsu or go to therapy or something.
Right. And you're more likely to do that as a police officer, as a first responder, as a human being, if you know you can, right? If you're trained, you have the filter of going, I know what I can do, and so I don't want to do that. But when people don't do that and then they're in a conflict, then they try to do some craziness. They swing a haymaker, they grab something and hit somebody with it because they're scared for their life, and they end up killing someone or seriously injuring someone who's just having a bad day, or has a mental health disorder, or whatever.
And you said it, and I'll say this, and I'm not saying this proudly, but I've been in lots of situations, and I've accidentally hurt people training, being machismo, or you go get in a fight and you go do an MMA fight, you hurt somebody, and then I look back and I go, man, a guy named Chaz Skelly who fought in the UFC almost knocked my left front tooth out during a Bellator fight once. I remember the punch came straight left hand, boom, and I remember thinking, he just knocked my tooth out, and we have people in our society, whatever. I mean, this is not a political argument. This is just a societal argument. We have people talking about violence against somebody else, and they're taking that lightly, because if you've never been hurt, or if you've never hurt anybody, you don't know what you're talking about. And if you hurt people and you're happy about doing it, you need to call Clint Davis Counseling. All right, they'll take care of you. No, like, it's not a good thing to hurt somebody. Yeah. Right? In self-defense.
And you don't feel good about it afterwards.
No, in self-defense, the only thing I feel good about is that I get to go home and hug my children. Yeah. That's the only thing you should feel good about. And not to say that your initial instinct isn't, oh, well, I'm glad I got out of that, or I'm glad he's hurt, not me. That's initial instinct. But when you have time to process it and you have time to think about it, we shouldn't want to hurt people.
Yeah, I've talked to so many people. We talked about this the other day, but that are concealed carry people, gun people who are like, oh yeah, if this, they see a shooting in the theater and they're like, oh, I totally would have done this, this, and this. And it's like, I'm sorry, have you been in the military? Like, have you been in a situation where you've been shot at? Because I guarantee you, like most of us, the first time it happens, you're going to duck down behind something and you're going to hope to God nobody shoots you. Right. Like, that's your first initial instinct, because you have to practice and you have to desensitize yourself to the actual situation. And it's the same thing with a fight. I mean, even if you train jiu-jitsu, like, you hope that the reason we do it and do self-defense is because you drill it and you drill it and you drill it and you drill it, so that when someone grabs you, your instinct is to respond appropriately, not to flail or do something crazy or do something like, do a single leg on somebody in a parking lot because they're a punk. Right. I mean, that's the other part, right? I mean, you have to think about, and you said this the other day, like, if you single leg somebody or double leg somebody and their head hits the concrete and they die because they're talking trash to you after the bar, you're not really training jiu-jitsu. Like, you're not really thinking about the whole thing. So jiu-jitsu is a tool that can work for you if you're doing like a gun, like anything else. But the person who's doing it can make it super toxic. I just think it's harder to do that with jiu-jitsu than lots of other things.
Mm-hmm. Silvio Barron said this. He's an 8th degree black belt under Alvaro Barreto, who is one of Master Elio's original black belts. Gotten to meet him several times. He's fantastic. He does a lot of self-defense. And he was talking about this. He goes, no one should ever be able to say anything to you to make you want to fight them.
Mm. Yeah, you said this in class before, and I've used this in therapy.
There's never a reason for anybody to say anything to you, because there are only one or two things. One is they're lying to you, or two, they're telling the truth, right? Mike, you're really funny. Okay, that's a lie, and I'm not going to go beat him up.
No, that's true, Mike.
At times it is. At times I have my moments. But, well, you're ugly. Okay, it's the truth. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to beat the guy up for making an observation, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in reality, man, that ego can hurt other people too. Mm-hmm. And I think the more you train jiu-jitsu, the longer you train it, the more it becomes about other people anyway.
Absolutely.
And but that being said, like, and I'm not talking about the time where, you're a young lady and you're walking to your car and some guy grabs you by the hair. Man, that guy may need his wrist broken. That guy may need to have his head bounced off the ground for you to get away. I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about is two kids arguing over something. The girl broke up with you. Man, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. It's not worth hurting the guy. It's not his fault, right? Or you getting hurt over it, or somebody saying something mean about you. Man, you know what? People are going to do what they're going to do. That's a them problem.
Yeah, sure, man. Yeah.
That's a them problem.
It's like that bully Daniel that tried to pick on that kid Johnny and steal his girlfriend.
I know. Yeah. Do y'all hold to that Daniel?
I'm Team Johnny for sure.
Cobra Kai is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So in the Cobra Kai, if you haven't watched it, hashtag spoilers ahead, right?
Hash brown. Johnny said hash brown.
We're about to give some spoilers. Okay, if you haven't seen Cobra Kai, we're going to give spoilers.
We're going to give, not going to give too many, but I think that Johnny is legitimately trying to be better. Johnny's kind of had a rough run of it. Mm-hmm. He's legitimately trying to be better, and Daniel is constantly having to check himself because he really wants to do something evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Johnny has a good side that kind of that he kind of has to not overcome, but it's kind of always trying to emerge. And Daniel's always got that evil side that's trying to emerge.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. I think I think it is, even though it's funny in the new show, it's hilarious. It is very telling about martial arts, though. I mean, if you really read deep down into it, neither one of them are the good guy, neither one of them are the bad guy. Mm-hmm. They both have these egos that are getting in the way of different personalities and different backgrounds. And it wouldn't even be a season 1 or season 2 of Cobra Kai if they just talked for 2 seconds. Like the whole thing would have been resolved if they'd have just like, hey, wait a second, I meant this. But I think that goes to your point of the guy's quote is, you can't say, oh, well, they made me do this, or you made me feel this way. In your marriage, in your friendship, if somebody's saying something or doing something, it can certainly make you feel, or you can feel however you want to, but it can't make you believe that about yourself. It can't make you process those emotions, and it certainly can't make you act in behavior. And I think what you're speaking to is our societal issue of becoming a victim and having a victim mentality. And everyone owes me, and because my dad did this and because my dad did that, then now I can just sit in it and be however I want to. And we are trying, as a counseling profession, and especially here, to help people walk the line of both of those things. Of saying, no, you can't just say that's in the past and it's over. You've got to process that. You've got to acknowledge that you were a victim. You've got to acknowledge that you were in pain and that you didn't deserve that. Not so that you can just acknowledge it, so that you can move past it and move out of the victim seat into personal responsibility. And so that you can live in the world, and that everything that comes at you isn't dangerous, and everything that you're dealing with isn't attacking your internal worth and value, all these external things. And jiu-jitsu, again, I think it teaches that lesson of like, you can't just let the world determine how you respond. But if you don't have any skill, if you've never been to therapy, you don't know how you feel, you don't understand your trauma, you've never dealt with your divorce or your baggage or your sexual abuse or whatever it is that you dealt with, then you have no weapons when someone at school bullies you, or when somebody in your marriage talks back to you, or when your kid's disobedient, or when somebody gets sick. You just respond out of nothing because you don't know anything. And I think that's what's so beautiful about knowing jiu-jitsu. Even at a blue belt level, I feel confident enough with a stranger who doesn't know anything to handle my own. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to go in every week and, win, but that's not even the goal.
Right.
Like, that's the beauty of it. The goal isn't to come in and win. The goal is to come in and train and connect and enjoy and have fun and laugh and give each other grief.
The goal is to grow.
Yes. Yeah, same thing in therapy. The goal is to grow. It's not to come in here and have an agenda and to, fix yourself or, do a specific thing. It's to grow and process. And we always say, it's a process, not an event. And I feel like jiu-jitsu is very much the same. One class doesn't determine your, entire jiu-jitsu career. 1 month. It's a process over time. And you can do it until you're old. I mean, I think that's the other thing that I love about it. I mean, I tried to play basketball. I told you guys this the other day. My knees hurt for like 8 weeks, and I'm like, I can't play basketball anymore. That's the thing I got to hang up, and that was very sad. But I can train jiu-jitsu every week, and, as long as you can touch your elbow to your knee, you're pretty good.
Everybody can do jiu-jitsu, and everybody should do jiu-jitsu. I try to get a lot of folks to do it, and everybody's like, I can't do it. No, you can. Everybody can do jiu-jitsu. And it's okay. I can't do that. My neck won't let me do that. Great, let's not do that. Let's do something else. I had one of my instructors, a guy named Dave, great guy. Man, before he started jiu-jitsu, he had a fused L4, L5, right? So he can't do certain things. He's a purple belt, and we just do what we can do.
Right, because in a situation, he's going to know what to do with his body and his leverage and his injuries.
And I love me some Dave. He's a great guy, and he just does what he can do. So,
absolutely.
And I think that's the interesting thing. Like, you don't have to be 6'10" and the best basketball player in the world to help people. You don't have to be LeBron James to be able to help people. You don't have to be Caltera to do jiu-jitsu. Caltera is one of the most amazing jiu-jitsu practitioners ever. You do not have to be him.
He was bullied a lot. That's why he got into it.
Yeah. And so he's he's a great guy too.
He's a small guy too.
And he's one of the most amazing jiu-jitsu practitioners of all time. But to the person who's sitting out there right now who doesn't train, who wants to train, your jiu-jitsu is just as important as Caltera's jiu-jitsu. Your jiu-jitsu is just as important, right? So that's the cool thing about it. I think the white belts jiu-jitsu is just as important as my brown belts. Like them learning is just as important as my brown belt learning.
So let's talk about somebody, if they've heard this podcast and they're like, oh my gosh, this sounds really enticing, like it sounds like something I need. What's kind of an initial class like? What would be their first experience being like?
You'll come in, you'll hear a bad joke.
Lots of bad jokes.
Something about being crabby.
Lots of movie references.
Yeah, there would be movie references. If
Joe
you don't,
Dirt.
Oh yeah, and I cannot give you a blue belt if you haven't seen Dumb and Dumber or Joe Dirt. That's just just out of the question. But no, you know what? You'll come in, I'll introduce you, and you'll do the technique of the day. I think the best way to learn to swim is to jump in, right? We'll do a bunch of stuff, and I always tell everybody, if you can't do it, don't do it. Don't push yourself too hard. Take it slow. You're not going to learn it. And I always make this joke too. If you already know it, all it means is I'm unemployed. Right? If you don't know it, it just means I still have a job. And so come in and just don't have any expectations. That's probably one of the biggest things jiu-jitsu's taught me about my marriage and about my kids. They're not me. Despite the fact that they have some of my genetic material, they're not me. And my wife is not me. My wife is so sweet and so beautiful and so godly. She is so much more of those things that I am. She's God's instrument to my salvation. She's also incredibly passive aggressive. And I am not. I'm like, hey, let's talk about this. And she's like, okay, later. But she's so awesome, and she's not me. She doesn't do things like I do. Right? So you're training with somebody and they do something you wouldn't do. You can't start over. You just got to react to what they're doing. You just got to deal with the thing that's come. They're going to do what they're going to do. You can't make anybody, in jiu-jitsu, you can't make anybody do what they don't want to do. Right? So I had all these expectations, and then I realized, man, I can't expect this guy to do, because if I expect him to do something and he does something else, I'm totally unprepared. Right? So I'm trying to reduce my expectations on what I would do and try to work around how they handle it and make it the most efficient way I can. So the same thing is true with your first jiu-jitsu class. Don't expect to come in there and and you might be one of the best in the world. You may be. You may not be. Just go in there and have fun and try to learn something.
It's so awkward. Like, the thing about it that nobody really can explain to you, but it's jiu-jitsu being self-defense is meaning that everybody knows defense. So when you try to start with somebody, they're in a defensive posture, but no offense. So you're in this weird, stage where they're like, yeah, come at me, bro. And you're like,
I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And I remember feeling that, like, do I just jump on you? And you realize how out of depth you are with knowing how to do anything offensively, like if you actually were in a bad situation.
I can't speak for women. I know women go through so women get told that all the time that you're smaller, that you can't do this because you're not strong enough. And I always say, ladies, y'all are better at jiu-jitsu than men are. Right? You're better.
Shout out to Amber. She's killing it.
Yes, Amber is killing it.
So many other people.
And Carmen and Sherilyn. Kayleen. By the way, ladies, Kayleen.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeannie. By the way, ladies, my highest ranking student is a female. She's my only black belt that I have at my school right now. I'm going to have more next year. But right now, for the last year, the highest ranking student I have is a female.
Yeah. And she's awesome.
And she's great, and
she'll put it on you.
She will. So women are told, are like, well, you're smaller, or they feel smaller, but I'm telling you, it works. And for men, we're told all our life, well, you got to be able to fight naturally. You got to be able to fight, and so it's hard to get through that ego of, oh well, I really don't know how to fight. Right? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, or I have to be big and strong to fight.
I got to be big and strong to fight, right? I got to be able to guys, I'm public confession, I've never benched over 200 pounds in my entire life. I've got the worst bench press ever, right? And one other thing, no one has ever accused me of being on steroids.
Right.
Like, I'm like, man, I can't even get accused of it. This is ridiculous. And so, and by the way, when I tell you Napoleon Dynamite, I'm serious.
Yeah, we're going to see that picture.
Yeah, we're going to see
Dude, it's like straight Uncle Rico hitting me in the face with a piece of steak. And
that's the best scene.
And so when I tell you, if I can do it, a homeschool kid from Faraday, Louisiana, who moved to North Arkansas because of Y2K, who looked like Napoleon Dynamite, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I promise you. I have kids who have trained with me who, when they first came in, they were like 13, 14 years old, and they couldn't look you in the eye. Now they're 2 and 3 stripe blue belts, and they're tough, and they'll get out there and get after it. And it's amazing to see them change. I've got young ladies who, I've just looked up and I've often asked myself, are they paying attention? Are they even watching what I'm doing? And then one day I look over and this 16-year-old girl's got this athletic 16-year-old boy, and he's trying to smash her, and he can't do anything with her.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you have been paying attention.
Yep.
Right?
That's good stuff.
And it's awesome.
Yeah, so they would come in, they get a gi right off the bat. Do they come in with a gi?
No, they just come in shorts and a t-shirt.
Okay.
Just come in shorts. And if we're doing something with the gi that night, we have loaner gis for you. Gi is a uniform, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
It's
pajamas.
It's pajamas, yeah. They're choking jammies. But if we don't need a uniform that night, whatever technique we're doing, we run on a curriculum every week, so all the instructors are all on the same page. We have this cool thing. It's an app. So, like, one of the biggest questions is, you get your uniform, how do I tie my belt?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the first thing we do is, on the first video on the app, is we're going to teach you how to tie your belt. And
because it's on the curriculum, right?
Because it's on the curriculum, yeah. And so we have 190-something videos from white belt all the way to purple belt. And so if you want your jiu-jitsu journey to start off and you don't know how to do something, all the drills are on there. All of these different things are on there, so it'll help you in your journey. We're going to actually film some more videos in the next few weeks to help even more. We have a private Facebook group that everybody has access to, everybody, including the instructors. And you can, if you have a question or anything like that, a lot of times it's just memes and people making fun of me, which is fine because that's what I'm there for.
And I will say this about that, there's no bullying or harassment or anything. Like, there's so much bad stuff on social media that's toxic, but our group is very much not like that, and there's none of that. And wouldn't I've seen already you not tolerate any kind of thing like that.
Yeah,
so
no, we don't.
Awesome. We
don't put up with anything like that. And then another thing that I try to tell everybody, if you have something that's bothering you, or whatever, and you need to talk to me, I've never turned anybody down talking to them.
For sure.
So, and we got a bunch of great instructors. I mean, and I've often said this: you can take us to a competition, and we can lose every single match. I'll still take my people because I love my people, and that's really what it's about.
Okay. And what's the website or the Facebook page?
So BozierJiu-Jitsu.com. Or the Facebook page is Louisiana Black Belt Academy. So I know they're the same thing. Louisiana Black Belt Academy, Shreveport Bossier. So my best friend is Steve Miller. He is a very significant influence in my martial art career, and he runs Louisiana Black Belt Academy. And so recently I had a name change. I was like, hey, man, I'm going to steal your name. Just want to let you know.
Nice.
I didn't ask. I'm like, I'm just going to steal it. He was like, okay. And
yep. Shout out to Steve Miller.
Yeah, Steve Miller's an amazing, amazing martial artist. So, but BozierJiu-Jitsu.com.
Okay.
You can email us, or you can find our phone number on our on our website. You can also find it on our Facebook page. If you call and a young lady answers, that's Sherilyn. She's amazing. Her and her husband Matt shot all of our videos for our app, and they're great people.
Yeah, they do an amazing job.
So we have classes 7 days a week, from 6 a.m. in the morning till 7:45 at night, and literally everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
And ladies, if you want to get in shape and you don't want to do jiu-jitsu, we have fitness kickboxing. We have a great kids program, and we even have a wrestling class and we actually have like actual stand-up. We have real kickboxing and Muay Thai classes, and we have kids kickboxing and a little bit of everything.
Is Jeannie still doing the women's self-defense?
So the way we do that is about every 10 weeks we'll do another 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
So I like to think of the women's self-defense class as an introduction to jiu-jitsu.
Sure. I know you'd like them to be doing jiu-jitsu all the time.
If you want to get real self-defense, and I ask people this, like, would you trust your life to a doctor who doctored, is that a thing?
Sure, let's
practiced,
go with that.
Practice, who doctored, once every 6 months.
Yeah.
No, you want the guy who's up to date, in the know, and the same thing is true with exercise. Like, if you work out once a month, you're not going to get results. Mm-hmm. You've got to be consistent. If you eat good, man, I ate good today. Well, what'd you eat the last 3 days? Well, terribly. You have to be consistent in all behaviors. And so if you want to have a solid foundation of self-defense, and you want to have I always suggest doing jiu-jitsu on a routine basis.
Mm-hmm.
Do it on a routine basis. You don't want a counselor that only sees, people once every 8 months.
No, definitely not.
You want somebody who's in the groove, who is up to date, who's got experience, and I think that's an important thing. But we will probably do one towards the first part of the year for the women's self-defense.
Okay, awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on. Is there, Uriah, anything you want to close with, or anything you want people to know about jiu-jitsu, or anything before we wrap up?
No, I think we did good today.
Yeah.
We think we said way more than we expected to say about jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Mike, you got anything you
Thank
want?
y'all for having me. Y'all
Yeah.
are, by the way, so they've said it several times that they're terrible. No, they're not. I'm going to brag on them. These guys are amazing. The podcast is awesome. They're great counselors, and they're also really good at jiu-jitsu.
Thanks, man. I got one more thing for you, so hold on, let me get this.
Okay.
So we got we're going to officially promote you to a white belt in podcasting.
Oh, nice.
So we got your episode 9
Nice.
podcast.
Can you hold it up
Man, that's awesome. So I hold it up this way.
for our Facebook page?
Do y'all have a?
So for those of you who aren't on the on watching it on YouTube, we got Mike white belt in jiu-jitsu, and it says "Asking Why" with Clint Davis, episode 9. Will you, Chip? Will you take a picture of all 3 of us real quick?
Yes, sir.
Will you hold that up so that they can see what it says? There we go. I signed
You're
it.
gonna laugh. I'm gonna show up and wear this in class.
Got it.
I'm gonna teach
Awesome.
class with it.
Nice, man.
No, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for I've been telling people that the guests you have on are all like the accolades and the things they have, and I'm like, man, it's pretty awesome to be on the podcast with all the accolades and all the experiences they have. And
Yeah, man. Well, that's the point, man, is to show, the world that, we're all in this together, no matter what your thing of life is, whether it's psychology or being a cop or being a first responder or being African-American or being whatever it is that's going on in your life. Jiu-jitsu, we're going to have a lot more of this and really getting down to what are the roots of why we do what we do as human beings and what are the benefits and, get past all the content and nonsense that the world focuses on. And ultimately, as Christians, to show people that, there's a tie into Christian living no matter what you're doing. And if it's really a dumpster fire, it's probably because it's not tying very well into good mental health or good Christianity. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate you coming on. And I value everybody just as much as anybody else because we're all experts in our fields, and not everybody's going to like jiu-jitsu, and not everybody's going to get anything out of this podcast. But I hope that the jiu-jitsu community that's listening, that they get something more out of their jiu-jitsu for listening. That this conversation that we're having, they go, oh man, yeah, I never picked up on this. I should look at this. I should think about this differently. Especially new white belts coming in who can listen to this and go, oh man, I didn't really ever realize that was a thing, or that's what I was shooting for, and this is why I'm stuck, and this is why this mentality is not good, and maybe this is bringing up trauma, or maybe I'm avoiding this because of my health. Like, get help. Go talk to somebody. Like, talk to your instructor. Talk to your people. Go talk to a therapist. Realize that it's integrating all the things in your life that are so important. And so that's my goal, man. So I really value your time. I appreciate what you do for us. I thank all the other people who we've been in jiu-jitsu with the last
Absolutely.
2 or 3 years who have trained with us and rolled with us and taught us things. And Brian Andrews, especially over at Gator Pit, for teaching us what he taught us and getting cutting our teeth in the beginning, Blunchy, Cron, all the people we've been under and trained with. And so I appreciate you, Mike.
oh, thank you guys. I appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, man. All right, we're out. Check in on the podcast. Subscribe on YouTube. Check it out on iTunes and all the other things that are listed. We love you guys and have a good day.